Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's with a particularly scarce pattern of Confederate carbine. Now, this is a model marked Columbus Armory, and we know who made it. It was a guy named John Gray, but we don't know a whole lot about the circumstances of its manufacture. But I think the story's fairly interesting, and the gun is just ridiculously rare. So, the gist of this is we should actually start with John Gray's brother, William Gray. He and a partner named Eldridge Greenwood were entrepreneurs in South Carolina before the Civil War. When the war broke out, they bought a sword factory. They hired a very competent, skilled English gunsmith by the name of J.P. Murray, and they set about making rifles and carbines for the Confederate government. Now, we have some documentation of these. Their guns are known and marked and fairly well understood. What's more interesting is that John Gray, William Gray's brother, was in a similar situation. He was also an entrepreneur. Most of his work before the war had been in the railroad industry, and he set up a manufacturing plant as well when the war broke out. And it appears that he started making guns just on his own, figuring, I know we can sell these to someone, let me just start making them, and then I'll send around some letters and see if I can get some interest and sell them. Well, he had the Confederate government as a potential client. He also had all the various southern states as potential clients, and it seems to have worked out. So in 1862, he wrote to Colonel Gorgas, who was in charge of Confederate ordnance, and said, hey, I'm sitting down here in Columbus, I've got this factory, I'm putting out 5 or 6 guns every day, but with the right sort of contract, I could be cranking out 500 or 600 a month, if you're interested. Like, I've already got this other contract going, I've got a couple hundred guns here already, let's talk. Well, it appears that he never actually got a second contract. He had one contract definitely for the state of Alabama, and that was for 200 rifles and 1,000 carbines. And as best we can tell, he never actually completed it. He was paid, based on correspondence, he was paid $45 per gun. The total amount he received from Alabama was enough for 183 guns, although the records show that he only delivered 176. Clearly, it wasn't the full 1,200 that he was contracted for. And by 1863, he had basically changed his business model, and he'd leased out some of his facilities and was doing much more in the way of general assorted useful goods. It looks like he got out of the gun business. So let's take a look at this. Let me show you how we can identify this and how we know that it is a Confederate carbine. This is a Mississippi pattern single-shot flintlock muzzle-loading rifle. The rifling is 3 lands and grooves. So we've got a brass lock bar there. Lock plate here. How do we know that this is Columbus Armory? Well, Mr. Gray very helpfully stamped the lock plate, Columbus Armory, right there. It's a little faint, but definitely unmistakable. Now, how do we know it's a Confederate gun? Well, we have a very faint stamping here that seems a little bit enigmatic. PRO, right there, over FCH. Again, it's a little hard to see. That's a very worn marking, but that is a known and documented inspector's stamp. So that's the mark of a captain, later Major Humphries. He was the commanding officer of the CSA Ordnance Department and the Arsenal at Columbus, Georgia. Not the Columbus Armory that is referenced on the lock plate here is a commercial endeavor. The Columbus Arsenal was the official CSA arsenal in Columbus. So we know that this was an official inspected and approved carbine that went into Confederate military service. There is one other mark on the gun, although it has absolutely no provenance, and that is a WS, maybe WJ. It's a little hard for me to tell here, but it's lightly carved into the stock of the gun. Someone's initials for sure, whether that was a Civil War soldier who carried this weapon, or his grandson playing around with it, or some guy 10 years ago, absolutely no way to know. But initials like this are not unheard of in period Civil War arms, so it could be original. Starting at the back, we have a brass butt plate. Mechanically speaking, we have a nice brass trigger guard here, sling swivel on the front of the trigger guard, one brass barrel band, and then a two-band nose cap with the front sling swivel, cleaning rod, ramrod for this, and a very small brass front sight that is coupled with an equally small and simple fixed rear sight. So no adjustability. That kind of makes sense for a carbine like this. It's going to be used really only at close range. There may only be a few really hard facts that we know, and a lot then of supposition. But to me, the story of the Columbus Armory carbines really does a pretty good job of encapsulating Confederate ordnance procurement in general. There was never a tremendous amount of industrial base in the South, in the Confederacy. They always had trouble procuring guns, and what they would come up with were a bunch of entrepreneurs who were able to set up something and figured, how hard can it be to make guns? Like, there's a ton of demand, we'll sell anything we can make. And then, in a story that's, well, not just relevant to the Confederacy, but to gun manufacture throughout time and across the world, it turns out guns are actually a lot harder to make than people think. And problems come up, and especially in the Confederacy, problems of manpower came up. You know, your workers would be conscripted into the army. Problems of raw material supply came up. You had a hard time getting iron, getting all of the other materials you needed to build guns. And even once you had them, the quality was often sketchy. Tooling was hard to come by. Money was hard to come by. Everything was set against the Confederacy in terms of developing small arms. And as a result, they get a lot of very small-scale production, things like this. The guns are well-known, established technology. These are simple percussion guns, rifles and muskets. In the North, you would see much more experimentation with cartridge-firing breech loaders. In the South, there were just a couple of those, but the vast majority was simple guns that people are much more confident being able to make, that take less equipment, less cost, and less new technology. So I believe there are a total of 3 of these marked Columbus that are well known. The chances are some of the unmarked guns typically associated with J.P. Murray are in fact John Gray Columbus Armory guns, but that's firmly in the realm of speculation at this point. Regardless, we do know for a fact that the 2 were very similar. So Gray, I'm sure, got quite a bit of help from his brother's outfit in his initial attempts at producing guns before he just gave up on the whole enterprise. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.